Hoppy Serves a Writ was an entertaining Hopalong Cassidy movie from 1943, and I realize I'm not really watching these in any particular order, so it was interesting to me that I've seen about maybe 10 of these so far, and at this point, Hopalong Cassidy is apparently a sheriff. I'm not sure when that happened, because every time I watch him, he's just a guy working with cattle at this Bar 20 ranch, but hey, I'm fine with it. He makes a good sheriff. So the story begins, a stagecoach has been held up, and some bad guys have made a run for it. With some money, they've crossed a state line from Texas into Oklahoma. Sheriff Hoppy hears about this and also hears from another guy who says that his cattle have been rustled by presumably the same people, since he describes a guy with a scar on his face. And, as it is a Hopalong Cassidy film, there has to be at least some cattle rustling that takes place. So Hoppy goes to investigate, and he sneaks into Oklahoma territory dressed in dapper clothing, which was kind of weird to see, but I liked it. And he goes in, starts talking to some people about buying cattle from, different ranchers. Now, the characters Johnny and California show up. California is the comic relief played by Andy Clyde, and Johnny is played by Jay Kirby, who's been in a bunch of these Hopalong movies. They weren't supposed to follow, but they go along anyway. They sneak in, and while they are there, they encounter Jean Hollister's character on a runaway horse, and they save her. Now, Hoppy, meanwhile, makes his way to a local saloon. He plays some poker with the locals, and he faces off with Tom Jordan, the local jerk. But Hoppy doesn't back down, and in fact, he takes the local jerk's poker seat. Yeah, Hoppy, he's not putting up with this. And what follows is not only a great poker game, but we get an awesome one-to-one, old-fashioned fist fight between Hoppy and Tom Jordan. Yeah, Hoppy. And clearly some stunt doubles stepped in, but it's still pretty cool. So Johnny and California show up at the saloon, even though they're not supposed to be there. And Hoppy has to basically pretend they're strangers because, he's undercover. But Tom Jordan and his bad guy friends, they suspect that Hoppy is working with them and that he might secretly be something like a U.S. Marshal. So Hoppy and his friends, they head off to Hollister's ranch because Hoppy suspects he's in trouble. And sure enough, bad guys show up there and there's a big shootout. Hoppy and his crew, they chase these bad guys off, and Hollister and his beautiful young daughter are both very grateful, and they even offer California and Johnny some work. So Hoppy's cool with this and he sets them both to work. The bad guys, for some reason, pursue California. They catch up with him, beat him up for a while, and they're trying to get him to confess who he works for. But old California, he's a stubborn old cuss. He hangs in there, and even though he gets a good beating, he doesn't reveal anything. But there's a big horse chase scene, and Hoppy and Johnny rescue California. He's no worse for wear. But he shares what he heard the bad guys talking about how, as part of their cattle rustling, they've been changing brands on the cattle. It always comes back to cattle rustling in these films. So they go looking for cattle with this particular new brand, and while they do so, they manage to capture one of the bad guys. And this was interesting. It was George Reeves, who plays the character Steve. George Reeves, we know, was the early Superman character, so that was pretty cool to see him. He's very young here in this film. So they capture him and they have him bring him back to the bad guy hideout so they can look around for some of the stolen money from the stagecoach from the beginning of the film. And while there's some silly antics from California. He gets his hand stuck in a mouse trap and stuff. And while they're looking around, Steve makes a run for it. But this is part of Hoppy's scheme. He wants him to go so that they can basically get him and his bad guy friends to pursue them because they are going to rustle some cattle of their own and lure the bad guys across the state line so that Hoppy would have the jurisdiction to make the arrest. Well, there's a big gunfight, and, well, you got to watch the end of the movie for yourself to see how it ends. Some quick closing thoughts. This was a fine Hopalong Cassidy film. I enjoy these. They're not overly deep. And he's something of a Superman in that he never seems to get harmed in any of these shootouts. It was really great to see George Reeves, and even Robert Mitchum is very briefly in this film as one of the bad guys. You can barely catch him, but the Internet Movie Database identified that he was in this, and sure enough, he's there. So if you get a chance, check out Hoppy Serves a Writ. This was an entertaining Hopalong Cassidy film from 1943.